Hi, I'm Ashley Kutcher, and if you are new here, welcome. You may know me from songs like Love You From a Distance or Boy From Carolina. Maybe my EP Play Responsibly that I just put out has some of my favorite songs on it. So one of my goals this year was to create more YouTube videos. I love watching YouTube videos. I have some of my favorite influencers, vloggers that I like watching. I've contemplated making my own videos for a while. One, because I don't feel like I'm a great influencer slash vlogger, but I am an artist and a songwriter, and maybe some of you guys are interested in watching what goes on behind the scenes day to day in this career. I've never really told my story of how I left nursing and became a full-time artist songwriter. So if you think that's something you're interested in, you can watch this intro video. I have some notes here that I wrote down so I don't get off topic and rant, because I tend to do that. But yeah, I typically avoid posting content like this because as an artist, I feel like I should be mysterious and everything, but like that. I post my songs for the internet. Why would I not give a background of the person behind them? So here we go. So in this video, I'm just gonna kind of explain a lot about my career and how I got into what I do now, but also a little bit just about me outside of my career, just sprinkle some stuff. Ew. Sprinkle some stuff in there you may not know about me, and obviously I'm not going to answer it all in this video, but if you have any questions or anything else you want to know, of course just leave it in the comments and I'll try to answer there. So I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up until I was about 5 on the water, right on the bay on the street called Park Beach Drive. When my mom and dad had my brother and my sister, the house was a little too small for that, so we moved to the suburbs of Bel Air, Maryland, and I grew up most of my childhood in Bel Air, Maryland. I actually really liked growing up in Bel Air. I wouldn't say it's like a small town, but it is one of those towns where everybody knows each other. I have a brother and I have a sister. My sister's name is Amanda and my brother's name is Dylan. My mom is a occupational therapist and my dad is a mortgage broker. Growing up, music was always a part of our family from an early age. I remember growing up, we had this drum kit that was sitting in my parents' room, and all of our early videos of just playing with the drum kit, overlooking the water, was just absolutely beautiful. We did move out of there when I was 5. When we moved to Bel Air, that's when we started the band room in the basement. And when I say we, I mean mostly my dad. He started buying guitars and recording equipment, everything that we could really use growing up to make our own like covers. And he is a drummer. He just really wanted to have a place that he could play. When we did move away from the water, which was about like 15-20 minutes away from Aberdeen, my parents actually bought a lot next to the house. It was like a smaller little shack, and so we still had that boat life growing up, whether it was in Aberdeen or Ocean City, Maryland, which was later on. So I feel like a lot of my childhood was boat life. We listened to a lot of country. My mom was a big Tim McGraw, Shania Twain fan, and my dad loved reggae music, so a lot of Bob Marley, UB40. I ended up really falling in love with albums like Andy Grammer, Hozier, James Bay. I feel like those were like the albums of my childhood. Honestly, anything you could listen to, like driving down a back road in Harford County, I absolutely loved. I loved anything with really good lyrics and a catchy melody, and I feel like those artists were just like so good. Not many people know this about me, but I was a competitive gymnast most of my life up until high school. I competed at level 8. I was training for 9, and that's when kind of my extreme anxiety, panic issues set in, and I ended up quitting going into high school. So most of my friends were the gym. Like, I didn't have any friends outside of gymnastics. That's all I hung out with. So I feel like high school was when I started really coming out of my shell, and I actually really enjoyed high school. So in high school, I was super involved in so many things, and I ended up picking up pole vaulting and cheerleading because I was no longer doing gymnastics, and those things just made acrobatic sense, I guess you could say. A little side story here, I ended up hurting my back in high school, but I didn't know it. I just kept repeatedly injuring my L5-S1 disc, which I've had issues with for about like 10 years now. I won't really go much into that, but that is something I've dealt with over the years. Back to the music thing, my first ever performance was in front of my entire high school. And it's ironic because I grew up a super shy kid. Like, I was afraid to say anything to anyone. I would cry if I felt offended by anything. I cried when I got my first love letter ever. I was just such an emotional, shy person. In high school, I really started coming out of my shell, and I was posting some videos online, just covers, as one does. Me and my sister kind of would do that together. I remember my friends were like, Ashley, like, you should really sing in front of the school. I was like, what if I embarrass myself in front of everyone? And honestly, looking back on the videos, those Those performances are embarrassing, but you know, I was like 14 years old or something like that. I ended up doing that show with my ex-boyfriend, who obviously I was dating at the time, but it was like my boyfriend and our friend and the school bassist teacher and like a rapper named Jaden, who was my friend. And it was just such a fun experience. And the whole lead up to it and the feeling you get before going on stage, I just kind of fell in love with performing, even though it was literally once a year for my high school, like, and everyone had to be there. Not had to be there, but you know, like they weren't coming for me. Like it was just a really fun experience, and I enjoyed the whole aspect of putting on a show. After high school, I felt super involved, and then I had the crisis of going to college. I had experienced some anxiety in high school, especially quitting gymnastics, and it came in the form of panic disorder. And I think when it came to college, I actually was like subconsciously scared of having another episode. So I purposely didn't go away very far for college. I stayed in Baltimore, 35 minutes from where I grew up. I went to Towson University. My dad went there, so it kind of felt like, I don't know, I knew the school. I'm actually glad now that I stayed in Maryland for a lot of reasons. I met a ton of people, but also like college tuition is just so crazy. I wanted to go down to South Carolina where all my friends were going to school at USC, but I'm glad I didn't now, and I did spend a lot of time having fun there. So when it came to what I wanted to pursue in college, I always had the idea that I wanted to be a nurse. I guess my mom being in the medical profession, I liked what she did. I liked that you can help people. I knew from an early age I did not want a job where I was sitting down in any form. I did not want to sit at a desk, so business was kind of like crossed off the table for me, even though I know it's not a total sitting job. Nursing just felt more entertaining to me and like working with people. I did go back and forth with it a little bit. During freshman year, I was looking into doing, you know, TV and film, but I ended up going against it. Talking to my family, who's like, they come from a very practical mindset. They're like, what are you gonna do with that degree? And honestly, I didn't know. I didn't have a goal for myself in TV and film, and I could see more of a clear path with nursing. During this time, I joined a sorority, I think my sophomore year. Honestly, I just like didn't find close people. I mean, it was fun for a bit, and then I think when you actually get into it, it was just like, it just wasn't my thing. So I ended up dropping that. I started waitressing at a steakhouse. And I'd waitressed in high school. I worked at Friendly's and IHOP. So I had a lot of waitressing experience. So I got a job at the steakhouse called Stony River. It's still in Towson. And so I was going to nursing school during the day, and I was waitressing at night. During this time, I was still posting videos of me singing online. And I think one of them like blew up in, it was like late middle school or early high school, and it was on Vine. It was a 6-second video of me singing. It was a Jonas Brothers song, and Joe Jonas ended up liking it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on cloud nine. Like, that was so exciting to me. So during this time of me waitressing and being in nursing school, I think it was sophomore year, when a bar reached out and asked me to play an acoustic happy hour set on a Sunday. And I first said no to this bar and said, I'm sorry, I've never played a 3-hour gig. I don't know how to. I don't even know how to prepare for that. And turned it down because honestly, it just sounded hard and I was lazy. And then I went on a ski vacation with my family, and they're like, Ashley, why did you turn that down? Like, they're offering you, I think they were offering me like $200, which was more than a waitressing shift for me. I ended up reaching back out to them and was like, okay, I'll do it. And I spent the next, I think, month or so before that first set getting an app where I could put all my songs on it, have all my chords, and I could just swipe. So I'd have like my setup of my acoustic guitar. My dad ended up helping me buy a Harbinger, which was kind of like a Bose speaker. You can plug it in. I basically brought my own system. From that day I played, it was so fun. I made money. I was able to hang out with some friends, have a little to drink. And from that bar, they asked me to play their other location, which was one directly in Baltimore in Fells Point. So I ended up playing that one like the weekend after. And then through that, I just started developing relationships with people in Baltimore that owned businesses, or, you know, whether they were booking agents or not. And I kind of got connected with a booking agent out of Baltimore. So that's kind of how that job started for me. I started making my own business cards and having my own little light set up. So when I'd play, you could see my name. And even some people from like companies would come and be like, hey, do you do private events, while I was singing in front of a bar, and I'd give them my information. So I ended up getting asked to do like a few little private events. I think even a wedding before I stopped doing this. Anyways, it was all really fun, and it actually allowed me to quit my waitressing job because I was making more money playing in Maryland than I was waitressing. Through being in Towson, there was a few DJs that I ended up becoming friends with. The first DJ I met was helping me produce my first music. I decided I wanted to try to write a song. My first song I ever wrote that I put out was called Leave Me Lonely. I really wanted it to be like a chill song, but I was working with like an EDM DJ, so it's really hard to kind of like mesh those two styles, but he honestly helped me a ton. Through playing in Baltimore, I ended up meeting my boyfriend, who I'm still together with to this day. I was playing a gig by the water in Baltimore. It was like a little festival thing. My boyfriend's band was playing the later slot and I was playing the earlier slot, and he actually met like my parents before he met me. Through my boyfriend, I met another producer, and this producer was so talented. He was like Grammy nominated from Maryland, but for like the rock pop punk scene, which if you know Baltimore, it's a big pop punk scene. That's when I was like getting a little better at writing songs. I really didn't write songs before college. Like I think I wrote a few poems when I was younger and stuff, as one does, but I was not fully like writing my own music. I ended up getting 2 songs I think produced by him, which were Lust, which was my first song to ever do well on TikTok. Same thing with Hands to Myself. That was another song that I wrote that Eric helped me produce, and I put that one out, and it also was doing well. During this time, this was when like the TikTok train really started, and I posted an acoustic version of a song I wrote called Love You From a Distance, which was just to a comment. Someone commented, write a song about this, and I did. Not going like crazy viral, but it did well. I held out on it because I was like, oh, I'm gonna do like an EP that'll be like a fun project. And I decided to wait and put Love You From a Distance on that. But I was getting so many people asking for Love You From a Distance that I was just like, okay, I'll get it produced and we'll put it out. And this song felt the most me that I had released so far. It was like an acoustic leaning country version of this song about this breakup I experienced. So I released that. And overnight, that song hit, I believe it was Apple Music charts or iTunes charts. I cannot remember which one. Again, I was so new to the music game, but it streamed like 150K the first day, which was unheard of to me. It was charting. I was getting hit up by managers, labels, publishers, and I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. So during this time, this was like pandemic time too, which is why TikTok was becoming popular. I was graduating nursing school that year. I was about to get my degree when this all happened. I'll rewind a little bit, but if you know anything about being in nursing school, usually you have a CNA job during this like last year. Like you're pretty much working in the hospital. Sometimes you get hired by that CNA job as a full nurse. CNA is a certified nursing assistant. So I actually had a CNA job at the ER. So I was working in the emergency department for like 5 days. I had to move over to a women's and outpatient clinic, which I ended up loving because I got COVID from the ER from a patient, and I did not mind at all, but I was living at home with my parents because everyone kind of moved home for COVID. Like no one was really staying in their apartments anymore. And I was terrified of this disease. I didn't know how bad it would get. My mom, if I came home with COVID or was exposed to COVID, my mom then couldn't go to work. So I ended up having to leave that just for the safety of my family, and ended up moving to women's and outpatient center. And I loved that. I worked in that for a few months, and I was helping them pretty much pre-op before their procedures. And the hours were really nice. It was like 7 to 3, and I worked a few times a week. I remember being in this job this week that Love You From a Distance came out, and between, shifts, I mean, I did a lot of cleaning and helping. I was doing IVs and everything. It was hard for me not to like look at my phone because I was getting hit up by major labels and everything, and I'm in my full PPE scrubs. I'll try to find a picture and put it up. People started finding out who I was just through Maryland, because when you're in Maryland, it's like it's not like an LA or like a Nashville or New York. Like they're like, wow, this is you? Like that's so cool. What are you doing here? And I was like, I'm just working. Like I don't know. And people in nursing school started to like ask me like what I was doing there. I think people found it odd, I guess, that I was in nursing school still and having this success with music online, but I really wanted the degree, and my parents, really wanted the degree that they helped me go through college for. So I ended up graduating and I got the nursing degree. This was all super remote at this point because everything was shut down. Like it was pandemic time. We were in the hospital because we were nursing students, but all the classes that we had were all remote. I would go from working in the hospital, finishing up school, to having these meetings, like 4 to 6 meetings a day with labels. I had a whole spreadsheet of like who I was talking to, what I wanted to do. It was just such a confusing time. I ended up talking to a lot of labels and did not think I was going to sign until I talked to this last label that I ended up falling in love with, and I ended up signing a deal with them. And I think my mindset at the time was, and what people had told me, which helped me, was nursing will always be there. You can always go back and become a nurse at any age in life. Music and this opportunity that I was getting to write music for a living and perform was like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I took it. And I would like to say that it was an easy decision, but it was not. And it continued to not be an easy decision throughout my first year or so of being signed. I wasn't allowed to play any shows because of the pandemic. I wasn't allowed to fly out and be with my team or meet any writers or artists because of the pandemic. So I was mostly isolated to my home in Baltimore. With my record deal, I did buy a house in Baltimore. I basically was cooped up there, and I lived with a few roommates, but everyone was going to work during the day or working remote from their room, and I was like, I don't even know what I was doing. And I think that caused a ton of anxiety for me. When the pandemic did let up and I was able to travel, I had some of the worst panic attacks of my life traveling out to LA for the first time. Again, I had lived in Maryland my entire life. I had never left. I was scared to leave for college. So flying out across the country alone caused extreme panic and a lot of imposter syndrome. I remember even coming out to LA for my first time ever, and my A&R, who was kind of like my manager, honestly, I went to her house and she tried to take me out to dinner the first night I got to LA. I started crying. I was crying at the table. I was so out of place. She took me back and just let me hang out on her couch and watch movies the whole night, which was great. About this transition, when I got the opportunity to come out here finally and write music and work with people, I really had any opportunity I wanted. I could work with whatever producer I wanted. The label was offering that for me. They put me in the room with a lot of pop producers, and me, being a brand new artist, I didn't know what I wanted out of production of a song. I could not verbally explain my thoughts. I was just trying everything. I tried pop, EDM leaning stuff. I went back to my acoustic sort of roots and did some of that. And I think some of my projects were like very blended and it did not sound cohesive. I think a lot of my earlier projects were not cohesive because you were actively listening to me develop who I was. It takes a lot longer than you think, or that I thought, to develop a sound when you are new and never had a vision of being an artist in the first place. But finally, I was able to tour. I went on my first little tour and sold out those shows. And that was the first time I was like, wow, these people are really listening. They're right there in front of me. They're not on the internet behind a screen anymore. Like, there's people that like my music. And that was so cool. And touring has become one of my absolute favorite things to do. And it is absolutely the most challenging thing to do. To be on the road, away from home, with new people, meeting new people every night, lack of sleep. It is so challenging, but it's so rewarding. And honestly, that's kind of what keeps me going throughout this whole process. So finally I was able to do that, but my moment had passed a little bit, I would say. And not in like a bad way. It's just like, you know, songs go viral, they do well, and then they go away a little bit and then you have something new. And that original virality moment was very hard to recreate. And I wasn't exactly ever trying to recreate it, but it definitely felt like by the time the pandemic had let up, I wasn't being at the forefront of festival slots or, you know, any of that stuff, which was hard because I had goals that I wanted, that I originally signed with. I wanted to play more I wanted to play festivals. I wanted to tour more. I wanted to open for someone. I wanted to have my songs synced in movies. I wanted to do all this stuff. And it just felt like year after year I was asking, but like nothing was really crazy happening. And I don't blame that on anybody. I think it's a big combination of me as an artist not knowing who I was, and also the label having other artists, and there's new and exciting people popping up all the time. And as a major label, you chase that, and that makes sense to me. And to be honest, my team over at my label became my absolute like best friends. We talked every day, and definitely like a work setting, but you become close with those people. They helped me do so much. I never had an issue with my label not being able to release music, not being able to do what I want. Like they would, if I wanted a stylist or a creative director, they were like, here's options, here's what you can do. There was never a no in there. I really appreciate that. And I honestly would not, people were like, would you take back being signed? I was like, no. Like that experience was so useful, so eye-opening for me. And having that team being able to be there for the beginning of my career was, I think, super helpful. And I still have so much respect for them to this day. Probably about like a year ago now, which is crazy, but about a year ago now, I was dropped for many reasons, I believe. But mainly, I think when you are in a partnership for a long time, you either decide to continue working together or your time kind of comes to a close and you move on. And I honestly think that's where we were at. I think we had done as much as possible as we could together. And it was time to move on for both of us. On my projects I did with them, I released a project called 180, which was my first EP that had Love You From a Distance on it, The Night You Left. And then I had my second EP, which was called Survive My Own Mind. That was a lot about my anxiety and just trying to figure out who I was. And then I had my album, my first album called House in the Water. And while I am so proud of all these projects, and if I'm specifically talking about House on the Water, I was so close to nailing my sound as an artist while that project was happening. And part of me knows that I rushed that album, that first album, because I was scared, because of money, because of fear. I knew that was my last project with this label. Well, in a way, I knew that this project, either after it, I get dropped or I get picked up again and I make money again. And I think part of me has always had this scared, which motivates me a lot, but it's very much a fear of failure, of going broke, like a fear of so many things. And I think I rushed it out just to get to the next step. While I am so proud of songs on there, I do not think that it was as cohesive as it could have been. I think there's still some songs on there that were like poppy that didn't necessarily fit the entire vision that I wanted to go for. But of course, during this time, I was writing songs for this Play Responsibly era, where I was in that pocket pretty much. And I was like, oh, this is what I probably should have gone with, but you can't go back and you can always release more music. So as soon as I got dropped, I was like, I have this project that is in the pocket of what I wanted probably the album to sound like. Why not just put it out independently? I was really lucky during that time. I was in a position where I was able to self-fund my entire project. How's the Weather was the first independent song that I dropped off of it. And I was scared. Obviously, I was like, I've never released a song without the label. At least I hadn't since I was, first starting out years ago. And people were still listening. It was still getting playlisted. It was still actively out there. People were liking it, and that was so cool to see because it was independent. I owned that song, and I didn't realize how much I missed owning my music. So I own all of Play Responsibly, my most recent project, and that feeling just feels so good. I don't know if I will ever end up re-signing. I don't know if I will sign a publishing deal. I don't know. I don't want to say never, but as of right now, I'm really enjoying where I'm at and trying to do this alone. And when I say alone, I mean without a label. But just because I'm not working with my label anymore does not mean I do not have an amazing manager who is helping me out, who I absolutely love, and we work every day together. I still have my agents who help me book shows and help me do my tour. And then I also have been with the same lawyer for so long. So I still have people around me helping me, caring about me. This whole story and this whole journey has taught me so much about being an artist and about being a creative and having a vision. And there is a big difference between being a songwriter and an artist. Just because I can write a great song that's a pop song does not mean that fits my style as an artist and that I need to be releasing that. Over the years, I realized I was always writing country-leaning music, but I was never putting it to country production, so there was just that disconnect in a lot of music that I put out there. I love exploring this blend of country with pop and country with rock. I think it is so fun, and it is like just such a pocket that I feel like I could thrive in. And playing these songs for the first time on my most recent tour was so eye-opening. You guys were screaming the new songs, Plead, Plot Twist, How's the Weather. Those were my most reacted to, engaged songs. I have things that I'm obviously still working on, and when I say I know who I am as an artist, I have a pretty good idea of who I am. Does that mean I'll never switch it up? No, I don't think anyone 100% knows. This is the closest I've ever been and the most confident I feel in music, and I know that because I put out a song and I still listen to it. I'm like, that's still a banger. Some of my old songs, I'm like, that just wasn't me. It didn't feel very authentic to me, but you can watch me grow up through my music if you go back and listen to my old stuff. That was more just about my music journey. Obviously, I mentioned a few things in there that I could elaborate on that I decided not to because this video would be like 2 hours long. The last end of this video, I kind of wanted to go over where I am now and kind of my goals for this year, which is maybe to sign a publishing deal, which is different than a recording deal. What is it called? A record deal. It's different from a record deal. I want to write more for other artists and meet other artists, and I want to write for movies and sync and have opportunity in that world. And I do think the right publishing company could really help me. I'm actually headed to Nashville next week and have a bunch of fun, exciting writes and meetings to see how I like it there. Speaking of Nashville, my other goal was to potentially move to Nashville. I moved to LA. I live in LA now. I left out a little backstory that I did move to New York City right when the pandemic let up. I lived there for a year because it was the closest thing to Maryland. I moved out of there within a year. I knew it wasn't like the right place for me, even though it was really fun. And then I moved to LA right after that. I'm still here in LA. I've been here for about a year and a few months. I moved here because my label was out here at the time, and the only people I knew who I was writing with were in LA. So that just made the most sense for me. Seeing Nashville, more of the lifestyle there, I honestly feel like I might fit in a little better there, especially with writing the type of music that I do. And then another goal is to document more. This is my little start here this year. I have a camera. I love YouTube. Might as well use it. I'm also going on a spring 2025 tour, opening for Michael Markagi. This is my first ever opening slot. I'm super excited for that. I've wanted this since the moment I started playing music. That'll be something that I'll also tour vlog. I also want to play as many shows, festivals, writers rounds, anything where I can get up there and play for you guys or meet you guys, I would love to do. So yeah, I think I touched on a lot of stuff. I hope that was cohesive, hopefully. But if you want to know anything else more about me, or if you're new here and just want to ask any questions, please ask questions in the comments and I will answer anything you want to know. But for now, I hope you have a good start to your year, and I'm excited to keep showing you mine. So yeah, okay, bye.